Let's do it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to 98 Octane. I'm Joe Fisher, and I'll let Alex introduce himself.
Hey, everybody. So I'm Alex. I'm with APSC. It's Adaptable Physique and Strength Conditioning. Website's just adaptablestrength.com. Joe and I together are going to be starting this presentation series with part one today for just starting and getting into everything. It's called Start Your Engines because this is the beginning, and we're going to keep moving forward as we go on. But in order for you to actually get a handle on us, here's just a little short bit about us. So I'll start just with the fact that 98 Octane has been really friendly to me, and I've been incredibly grateful to work with 98 Octane. It's military first responders. I've got a little bit of the first responder side because I was working for 911 for about 4 years in a couple of different centers and saw all sorts of health issues on the first responder side. I had glimpses into the police side, the fire side, and the dispatch side. As far as the lifting, health, and everything goes, I've been lifting for myself for the last 23 years. I've got a degree in biology. I'm a personal trainer, nutrition coach. I used to compete in powerlifting. Now I'm have my own business for coaching for bodybuilding, powerlifting, and I really try and have a overarching belief that a practical, healthy, simpler approach is generally going to be better. It's one of the things that I've appreciated about 98 Octane. But Joe, why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself as well?
100% awesome. I'm Joe Fisher, Director of Operations at 98 Octane. I've always been active as a kid growing up, did a bunch of sports. I wrestled and did Taekwondo when I was younger. That's what really got me into fitness and pushing myself, wrestling, cutting weight, going to tournaments and wrestling from 75 pounds to 135 pounds. I was a little guy, but we were getting it. And then I joined the Army, 9 years, Air Defense Artillery. We did Patriot missiles and protected the skies. I regrettably, while in the service, actually gained a bunch of weight, and I became lackadaisical, and I let myself go, and I thought I was lost, which I was, and I found myself through research, finding out what I was eating and understanding the outcomes that it has on my body, and that's what 98 Octane does. We're just trying to make it simple and keep it easy for the individuals who need the help. But yeah, super excited for this collaboration. Excited to see your presentation.
Yep. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get into the actual information point. And the most important thing to recognize when you are beginning a training program is where are you at this moment in time? Because there, yes, there is importance about recognizing that maybe 5, 10 years ago, maybe you're more active, you're competitive in something. Maybe you were going through boot camp, or maybe you were going through your police academy, something where you had requirements on your physical capability. And now that that has gone away, you've let yourself go a little bit, you're not as active, and you realize maybe you're getting winded as you go up the stairs. Or maybe you've been active your entire life and you're just trying to get to the next level. There are always different starting points, but no matter what, you can always get better. So when you're looking at yourself and where you are in your beginning, one of the things that I really like about 98 Octane is this really easy to understand way of thinking about it, where it's, are you in the crawl stage, the walk stage, or the run stage? And this crawl, walk, run approach is a really natural way to think about how to progress as you're going forward. So you'll notice there we've got the beginner slash detrained. That's a really important distinction there when you're trying to establish where you are, because there's a difference between someone who has never been physical in their entire life trying to then get the experience and the coordination and then taking in all the new information to figure out what is the optimal way to move forward, versus someone who has been physically capable before but is now in a detrained state. So there's going to be a different way that these two people who are both in the crawl stage would actually then handle things going forward. And one of the interesting things to recognize is that if you're a person who's simply in a detrained state, what you have to do is start doing less than you think you should. If you went straight back to trying to do the workouts that you were doing when you were at your physical peak, you're going to set yourself up for failure. it is a really unsustainable approach and a fast way to be really, really, really demoralized. So, you want to take a look at how can I set myself up for success? If you are a beginner, start off slow. If you're detrained, start off slow. If you're more in the intermediate stage where you've been active, then you know what? Maybe we can hit the ground running a bit and actually try to set yourself up with a higher standard. But speaking of getting hitting the ground running, if you are advanced, you now have a whole different thing you have to try to figure out, and that is you are already at a physically very capable state. So now, in order to progress from there, you have to do more than someone who's in the crawl stage or the walk stage. Because for you, you're trying to reach a new peak. And that requires a lot of dedication and making sure that you know how to progressively overload to make sure you are keeping new demands happening to your body. That is going to be a conversation, probably more for so another time. Today, what I want to focus on are the first two parts, the crawl stage and the walk stage, where you're trying to begin, you're trying to begin again, or you're trying to figure out how to get into a more standardized, formalized way to train. The last thing to do for this is to make sure that you understand the importance of habits. You are in a state where you are trying to progress. And what you want to do to make sure that you can progress is to be consistent. Habits are going to be the basis for how you can then build up over time. And that's hard.
Yes,
I
it
will
is.
never, ever underestimate how hard that can be.
Yeah, habits are everything. I mean, setting intentions and making sure that you know what you want to do and making a plan for that is how you accomplish anything in this world. So I think that's a super fundamental, a crawl phase, right? Let's just figure out what we want to do. Let's set intention and figure out where we want to go. But yeah, I love it. I love it. Great, Alex.
Yep, yep. The habits is key. You can't do anything if your habits are not in place. So, the main focus today is about how to set yourself up with resistance training. And notice that I'm saying resistance training, I'm not saying weightlifting, because yeah, weightlifting is fantastic. If you can squat to the depth that you see right there, then you are immediately a very capable person. If you can squat to that depth with a bunch of weight on your back, more credit to you. However, weightlifting is not necessary when it comes to the style of training. There is a lot that can be gained with simply just using your body weight. So when I'm saying resistance training, you are looking at potentially weight training, you're looking at potentially calisthenics, and you're trying to simply just make sure that whatever you are doing is difficult in the correct way. And if you want to be a little more analytical about it, you can turn it into a little formula where you're trying to reach the maximal amount of load plus the maximal range of motion you are healthily capable of while adding in a degree of tension throughout the entirety of that. And if you can combine those three things, you will create an equation that will give you the most growth possible. Now, that is a really fancy way of saying you need to have solid, consistent habits where you can then progress over time to put yourself under more demanding situations, more load, in order to keep that progression happening for as long as you can possibly go for. And that could be decades if you set yourself up in the proper way. And that means understanding the benefits. The goal is really going to be important because you need to recognize the goal in relation to the training. We'll talk about that more later on, but that's relevant for this specific point. The fact that you can get really good cardio benefits with weight training and calisthenics if you are going ahead and going to a hard enough intensity about it. You want to make sure that you're going to go to that intensity because you need that in order to get maximal benefits for your bone density. If you are able to balance with a bunch of weight on you, then guess what? Your coordination is going to improve. But one thing we haven't talked about yet in terms of all of this is that it's not just physical benefits that you're going to experience. The mental benefits are almost more important because if you are confident and capable, there is not a single aspect of your life that is going to take meaning out of. It's going to only improve everything.
And this is like all it's all coming together here. So we set intentions and we set goals and we start slow. A big thing that we see though is people jump back in. They're detrained. They've done what they've done before, and they get off put. They say, "Oh, I'm too sore. Oh, if I go back, I'm gonna be too sore." Right? But we're not asking them to go back and do exactly what they were doing. We're just asking them to start, whether it's walking the dog or doing squats or calisthenics or anything. We just need people to get up and get moving and get back to their former selves. But that soreness, that's like a real big thing for people. People are upset at themselves for being too sore after lifting, and there's ways of getting around it. You don't need to be sore to be benefiting your body. But soreness usually does mean that you are going in the right direction. So, yeah, all full circle.
Yep, that soreness is a really key component, and we'll touch more about it later on because one of the future aspects of this whole situation where we're going to be streaming these next few weeks is going to be on the recovery thing. But I
Mm-hmm.
think Joe makes a really good point in bringing that up now because you want to make sure that you do set yourself up for success in managing soreness to a certain degree, especially for someone who's in a detrained state. Because you think your capability is going to be farther than realistically it is now, and you know how to push, you therefore make that connection that I have to push as hard as I used to do what I used to as quickly as I possibly can. And then you set yourself up for being sore for the next full week and unable to function. You want to set yourself up for success by starting off lighter than you think you need to. That way, you don't have that happen. You want to encourage yourself to build those habits over time and make sure that you are going to be able to repeat the workouts and you want to do them decently often. So, this is then going to come into the next bit where you are trying to figure out, based off of where you are, how do you actually examine what you should be doing in terms of that level of intensity. So here we have the frequency, intensity, and duration in relation to the crawl, walk, run. So when you are in a detrained state and you're thinking, oh yeah, well, if I look at this thing, I used to be straight down that run category. I was doing 6 times per week, really high intensity, pushing as far out as I possibly can and competing at a high level. And you say, let's say you, to put a time frame on it, you haven't trained for a year and you're trying to get back to it. If you go straight down that run column, you're going to be in a really sorry state. But let's say you take this approach where you recognize that where you were is not where you are. You start going down that left side column. Maybe one time a week is a little too lackadaisical for you. In that case, just bring it down a little bit more. Maybe we'll start with 2 times a week. I'm going to rest for a decent amount of time, keep it to a medium intensity, and do more whole body exercises where I can get my coordination back to what it was. And I'm going to have the mindset that I'm not trying to compete. All I'm trying to do is just get an honest look at where I am now. And then I'm going to go ahead and next week just bring it up a small step. Not a huge step, just a small step. So maybe then next week, I'll maybe do that same light workout instead of twice a week, 3 times a week. You do that for the next month or so, and you start building up the intensity, maybe increasing that RPE, going from stopping yourself at 6. All right, I'm going to go ahead and touch 7. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and then touch 8. And you set yourself up that you are going to be able to have that confidence built back up because you are seeing yourself not fail. And failure is a great thing. But failure is a thing that should happen later on when you are designing the program for you to have the correct time to fail to grow as much as possible. And right when you are in that crawl stage is not the time to fail. That is the time to succeed and feel that you have done a good job. And it's hard to wrap yourself around failing being a good thing. Let that be a later thing for you.
100%. Yeah, and in our 8Ps, pride is one of them. And being proud of yourself for making those little accomplishments is huge, man. Like, getting up off the couch and going to walk the dog is a feat that you should be proud of, because there are people out there that are not doing that, and your former self wasn't doing that. So being proud of small accomplishments is always necessary, for sure.
Yep. One of the biggest things that I'll talk to my clients about is that you need to recognize the small victories. And I'm sure everyone has had this situation where you have this goal that is months down the line and you're working for it the entire time. And then you get it. And after you get it, that's when you feel successful. Well, we've had the same times where we have gone through that process, gone 3/4 of the way through. We can see the end stretch happening, and then something happens and you get derailed. You can't go for that. And you then have to play the mental gymnastic game of, well, I didn't get it, I failed, versus trying to give yourself to recognizing, you know what, I didn't get to the end goal, but I didn't fail. I still made progress. I got 80% of the way there, and then something happened. And it may not have been in my control, but I don't want to negate that 80% of progress because you're missed out on the last 20%. If you want to look at it in terms of a lifting way, that's even easier because now you have numbers you can base it on instead of just the feelings that you get. If you have the goal that you are going to spend 2 months and you're going to focus on your squat, right now you're a decent squatter and you can squat 350 pounds. Amazing. And you have the goal to squat 400. And then you get the pass at the end of the program, but you can only squat 380. Does that mean you failed? You still got 30 pounds stronger in a very short span of time. And you know what? For someone who is that experienced, that they can squat 350 and they go to 380 in a short amount of time, anyone who has been at a high level realizes that every successive pound increase in your strength takes more to get than the prior pound.
100%.
So you did not fail at getting the 400. You just now have to have that 400 pushed back a little bit, but recognize that 30-pound increase that you got because that is a huge, huge win.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. It all comes back down to pride. Being proud of that hard work that you're putting in. If you are working hard, look back, man. It's good. It's going in the right
Yep,
direction. Awesome.
yep, very much so. So let's go ahead and move on from the resistance training side and take a look at the cardio side. So you'll notice that when we looked at the resistance training slide, I put the word under it essential. It is essential. You can get cardio benefits from resistance training. However, cardio I'm putting as strongly encouraged because you cannot get resistance training benefits from doing cardio. So the benefits of cardio are different than the benefits of resistance training. You can see in terms of cardio, there are some similarities. You're still getting cardio improvement, you're still getting coordination and balance, and you're still getting confidence. So you have those three similarities. One of the differences in those, though, is that you're going to get more cardio benefit from doing cardio specific training. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
The differences, though, are now going to be in the fact that you're looking at a lack of bone density increase, but there still are arguably going to be some depending on the type of cardio. And that's
Right.
why it's not in there, but I want to point it out. For example, if you're a runner on a hard pavement, you get some impact. So you know what? You're going to get a little bit of bone density improvement. However, if you're a cyclist, a swimmer, you only go on the elliptical, then you're not really getting that same level of impact.
Yep.
So I can't make a blanket statement that says bone density improvement. I can put it in here as an additional part to it where it's like, yes, some modalities, yes, but other modalities, no. And I'm trying to keep these into more absolute statements. But no matter what kind of cardio you're doing, you get more stamina. That's going to be a universal part of cardio, assuming you let the cardio be hard. And that goes back into that intensity aspect that will, again, be hitting constantly throughout this entirety of this presentation.
Yeah, yeah, and doing hard things is good for you. Pushing through hard times. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Love it. Hate cardio. Love this.
Exactly. Very true.
Yeah,
Cardio is not my friend.
yeah.
Sometimes I joke about if I'm doing squats or deadlifts and it's anything above 5 reps, I count that as my cardio.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. 3-4 minute break after that one. Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, it's great. It's great. So, but here's the last thing I want to talk about. If you look at this last point in the benefits, I say potentially greater calorie burning than resistance training. This is a really, really huge thing to consider, because if you look at the way people speak about cardio, it's like, oh, you want to lose weight? Oh, just do cardio and the weight will come right off of you. However, there's a lot of things that go into that statement. So when you look at what an exercise actually does in terms of the energy cost, there are a lot of things to consider. And the thing that doesn't get understood unless you are taught is that your body makes adaptations on how you behave after the workout based off of how hard the workout was. So if we take the numerical approach to this, and I'm just going to be making up numbers, but I'll get the point across. Let's say you are using an app and it is trying to track how much food you're supposed to eat in a day. And you input, well, I was on the treadmill earlier today and it said I burned 100 calories. So I'm going to put in that I burned 100 calories into this app. And then you're like, well, I'm going to go ahead and just add 100 calories to my diet for the day because I burned 100 calories. That is almost true. Almost. There are grains of truth there. But the thing is, if you then say, I did a weight workout, but it tells me I only burned 50 calories, then do I only add 50 calories for the work that I did and then to my diet? There's an annoying aspect about your body where, because you were really active earlier on and you got really tired, your body adapts. And there's this thing called NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis.
Yeah.
Really, really fancy word. But really what it boils down to is that it's these incidental movements. Right now you see me moving, I'm gesturing, I'm trying to appear engaged, and it requires these little movements. When you have done a workout prior, your body will inadvertently reduce these things. And your gesturing won't be as emphatic, it'll be a little bit less. And you'll end up in a situation where you might have just plopped down on the couch. And you're like, I did a really hard workout. And then you end up sitting there for the next 3 hours, just flipping through channels, watching TV, or playing on your phone. And you're not tapping your toes, you're not moving around. And so you get less of an overall caloric burn from that. So these statements of I burned 50 calories, I burned 100 calories, therefore you add that amount of calories to it, is not actually true, because your body will then counterbalance it later on and make you burn less calories. It's an interesting concept, and I can go much more in depth into that to a scary degree. But for now, just recognize activity is activity. If you're going to keep track of your calories, don't change your calories because of the activity. Keep it simple. Do your cardio, do your weight workout, eat your diet as you would normally do it, and just continue to move on and look at everything overall in terms of the averages of the week.
And in 98 octane fashion, when talking about diet, we can't talk about not eating whole foods to fuel yourself right. Understanding where your food comes from and not eating chemicals is all of it for us. So, yeah.
Yep. Yep. So that's a little preview of what we'll be talking about next week. We'll go into more in depth on the nutritional aspect and the actual math upon how you burn the calories that you eat. This is just a little tidbit, little teaser. So we'll move on to the next moment, where we take a look at a very similar little graphic about how you're going to compare your frequency, intensity, duration with the crawl, walk, run. You have the same thing in terms of the progression of the frequency in which you do it. Could be 1 time a week or all just 6 times a week. And now is what I'm going to point out. If you noticed, I never said 7 times a week. We looked at resistance training, it still says 6 times. Cardio still says 6 times. Rest is important. Being intense and trying to go all out, gung-ho, and hitting everything hard is fantastic. However, you need to be able to have a view of the long game. And in order to be able to do this for decades on end, you need to have times of rest where you can have a way to let your body cool down. Because one thing to recognize is, yeah, you can partition your workouts. So you do a push, legs, pull, and you just repeat that. And on it, you're like, well, listen, I'm doing my body parts every 3 days. Therefore, I have the rest in between them. Individually, yes, but not systemically. You have to remember everything works in concert with each other. And when it comes to being aware of the systemic demand on your body, put in some times where you get total body rest. That's going to
Yeah.
be really important.
Yep. Rest. There's
Yep.
nothing else to clarify on that. I mean, you gotta slow down and chill out sometimes. Rest is really important. Can't do anything
Yeah.
7 times a week.
Yeah. And I know if you military first responder, you are fully, fully 100% aware of the feeling of being burnt out.
Yeah.
So you're trying to take care of yourself. We're trying to get you to be as functional as you can be, happy, confident, capable. In order to do that, rest needs to happen. There are going to be times where you get to have more, and honestly, there are going to be some times where it's not an option. We've all been in those things. If you're in the 911 center and the storm happens and it's the end of your shift, you know you're not going home because those phones are going off the hook. If you are a cop and a huge accident pile up happens and you are at the end of your shift, but there are 30 cars that just piled in together, you know you're not going home. You're going to be going to that scene and trying
Right.
to help. If you're going to be an ambulance, fire department, guess what? You're all going to that scene too, no matter what. There's always going to be an unavoidable demand. And you need to recognize that. And in some ways, it can be a good idea to bank rest in advance for that. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of planning for doing everything maybe 6 times a week, maybe you plan to do it with a 5 day of the week thing where you can have an optional 6 day. That way, if you have one of those situations happen, you don't technically disrupt your schedule. You don't lose those habits and you don't lose those rhythms. All you lost in that case was something that would be extra. And if you can have strategies like that, it will help you feel that you are accomplishing more. It'll help you feel more successful. It will take away some of the feelings of failure or broken promises or anything, however you wish to phrase it for yourself, that will help you maintain the attitude that you are succeeding.
I have a lot of stories on recovery and not getting rest and feeling horrible and 24-hour shifts for 11 months. Um, but we'll get to that on the recovery one. I'm excited for that one. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And you'll notice that we keep putting in these little teasers about what's happening later on. Everything is incredibly intertwined. And you can't be like, well, you know what, today is about training, and then we legitimately only talk about training, because then we'd be doing you a disservice, because we still have to acknowledge the interactions between the two. We'll go into a lot more in depth later on, but you always have to have the awareness of how much everything has to be brought in together to create one whole plan. And that's why one of the sessions that we'll be doing here is going to be, all right, we've talked about the training, we've talked about the nutrition, we've talked about the recovery. Now, how do we actually put this into practice? How do we combine all of these incredibly important and honestly, potentially time consuming aspects into a feasible, practical, reliable, consistent, and sustainable plan? I could probably find more adjectives for that, but I'll leave you with
I
just.
bet you could. Yeah. Yeah. I think small actionable steps, making goals, understanding where you want to go. I think that's a recipe for success.
Mhm. Yep. So now that aspect of goals is going to be important. We'll talk about that in a second. First, though, we need to define intensity. So we're going to go ahead and recognize that we are talking about resistance training. We need to make sure our training is actually truly, truly effective. And in order for that to happen, it has to be difficult. When you are doing resistance training, you are basically functioning in the scheme of sets and reps. So, how do we quantify something that is difficult to quantify? To put a number on intensity is realistically impossible to get 100% correct, but we can get close. In order to get close, my favorite way of putting a number on it is using RPE. It's the rating of perceived exertion. And what it tries to do is to quantify how much more you would be capable of doing. So it's a simple scale of 1 to 10, essentially. Now, there's really only purpose in RPE, maybe 5 to 10. So think about that. When we have RPE 10, it means you are done. There is nothing more you can do. You try to do that last rep and it just did not happen. Doesn't matter the situation. That that weight is not going up. That lift is not happening. That's RPE 10. It's maximum. Then you get into a little bit of the fine tuning aspect of RPE, which is RPE 9.5, where it's maybe you could get one more rep, but you're not quite sure. But you didn't go for it, so you can't say for certain. So if you did 9 reps and the last one was a grinder and everything, but then you racked the weight, you technically don't know if that was truly failure or not because you were able to complete the rep. But you don't know for certain. Therefore, you put in that 9.5. RPE 9, quite simply, you got that rep up and you were 100% certain you could have done another rep.
So
Could
so
not have gotten 2.
so RPE 10, my arms are up, I'm jiggling, I'm wiggling. What if I get it up? Is that still a 9.5 or is that a 10? That's
In my eyes, that's still a 9.5 because you completed the lift. You have not technically reached failure because you were able to complete. You might be at RPE 9.9999999, but it's not technically 10. 10 is when you went for the rep and it did not happen.
It's done. Yep.
It's
Okay,
done.
cool.
So that's a good way to quantify it for consistency's sake. Because if you start guessing, like, listen, I did that and that was it, but you completed the last rep, what if then the next day I come in and I'm like, all right, we're going to do a workout. And you're like, whew, yeah, that was done. And I'm like, no, do another set. And this time I'll tell you when to stop. You want to know what's happened for the majority of my clients that I do that with? And I just keep them going again. One big breath, again. One big breath, again. Usually, there's between 2 and 4 more reps that I end up being able to get out of them.
Squeezing it.
Yeah, and it goes into setting yourself up to have realistic standards.
Yeah.
And in order to actually truly know that you are at the peak of what you were able to do on that set, you have to go until you physically can't anymore. And that requires you being honest then. If you got that last rep, at best, you can give it a 9.5 because you didn't quite push yourself to the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'll also...
Yeah. RPE is really important, especially when we're talking about not being too sore and understanding where you're at and understanding your goals. Different RPEs are for different things. So,
yes. So let's go ahead and take our example of that guy who used to be really physically capable, but is in that D-trained state. So he's like, listen, I know what RPE 10 is. I can go ahead and do that. But then you know what? If he goes back into that first workout and push himself to RPE 10 on everything, he is going to be in a world of hurt for the next week. But let's say we take that same person in a different universe and then say, okay, you're going to start off, but instead of going to RPE 10, we're going to stop you at RPE 7. And he's just like, what? That's lazy. Like, why would I ever do that? And I'm like, well, it's because A, you don't want to get hurt. B, you're in a detrained state. And C, we need to start your first day back with success, not with failure. Those 3 considerations are enough to be like, all right, fine. I'll do a lower RPE for today. And if you need further encouragement, take a look at the research on RPE. There is good research that has shown that between RPE 7 and RPE 10, there is not that much difference in terms of the muscle growth that takes place. I won't lie and say that it's the same muscle growth. RPE 10 is going to have a little bit more muscle growth than RPE 7. But there is also the consideration of your goals, safety, where you are currently, and mentally where you are. Because there's a difference between physically and mentally, and that's a whole nother conversation.
And we will talk about that conversation. Yes.
Oh, yeah. We're probably going to hit the majority of conversations.
Yep. Great.
Yeah. Okay. But, so one of the things that I will encourage you to do is that if you go to my Instagram, and I really wish I could just show you the video because I hate feeling like I'm advertising myself. It's really icky to me. But one of the things that I did is I put up a video on there because of this presentation where I show you me doing a set. And it's a simple one where I'm just doing a seated leg curl. I'm completely locked into a machine and I don't have to have the safety concerns compared to if I was doing a deadlift or a barbell squat where pushing to RPE 10 can potentially put you into risky positions. So using a very controlled exercise, you can go ahead and watch that video and then try to predict how many more reps that I end up doing. Where at what point does my set end? And if you look right now in this little snapshot, me at rep 9, I'm hurting. And the question is, how far can I honestly go? And at the very end, what RPE did I actually finish at? Did I end at RPE 7, 8, 9, 10? And then see how good your guess is. And then do that with yourself. That whole thing is just an exercise, a game where you're trying to figure out, okay, what does it actually look like to push hard and be honest about what you are capable of?
Yeah, and sometimes that takes someone else telling you,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what personal trainers are great for. Is or your buddies, getting your buddies out there lifting with you is really important as well. The community
Yes.
aspect and having that second set of eyes to see that you aren't doing it right or you're not giving it your all. Push each other. Awesome.
Yes. So here's a note on that with having partners and pushing, because then it's easy to do what I call blind intensity. Blind intensity has value, but it comes with an inherent degree of risk. However, if you have intensity with intent, then you have your recipe to get as far as you possibly can go, because that means you can reach true levels of exertion while still being under control. But how many times have you looked at someone in the gym or someone on the field and they're trying to do this exercise and you're looking at them and you're going, how is that spine staying in one piece?
Mm-hmm.
They're trying really hard. The intensity is definitely there, but they don't have the intent. They don't have the control. So when you are with your friends, when you are with a trainer, make sure that everyone has the standard in place that yes, intensity is fantastic, but you have to earn the intensity. You have to earn the weight. You have to earn the greater levels of execution of the lift you are trying to do. And if you have not earned it, then you don't do it.
Yep. Be careful. Don't hurt yourself.
Yep.
And watch
But
out for
not,
your buddies. Yep.
yes, yes. The I will say this because getting hurt is one of the most frustrating things to happen in any kind of a journey like this. To keep it simple, I will say this: keep the standards not just during the set, but before and after. How you pick up the weight and how you put it down. Because quite simply, don't be that person who gets hurt after the lift has already been completed. Can you imagine being like, yeah, listen, I was doing this phenomenal set. I got my PR. I deadlifted 450 pounds for the first time ever. And I was so excited that I just locked the bar down. And then I felt a twinge in my back. Don't get hurt after the lift. Just put the weights down or anything in a safe position and then celebrate.
Yeah. Yeah, the same thing goes for everything. You need good form when you're picking up a box. If you're gonna move that mattress, you got to be careful, dude.
Yeah. And it's easy to get complacent because you have the mentality of, oh, it's done. I did the hard part. Make yourself safe even on the easy part.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So now we can get into the discussion of how to actually structure your training program. And you'll notice that I'm, again, not speaking in terms of this is the correct answer. This is already what I know is going to be the case. I'm continuing to just give options. So, are you going to just do resistance training only, cardio only? You're going to try and do both? And this goes back to something that Joe was talking about earlier and did a great job on, and that is trying to make sure that everything matches your goal, because it determines everything. So let's go ahead and take me as an example. Right now, I'm basically just trying to be big and strong. I'm not worrying about much else. So with those goals, cardio is not my number one thing. I'll do it, but not happily. A lot of my focus is going to be down towards the bottom right of this graph. where for me, it's more resistance training. But you'll notice in these examples here that there's a diagonal line where it goes from the realm of more cardio and less resistance training, or more resistance training, less cardio. And you'll notice that there's going to be nothing that is 100% in column A or 100% in column B. Everything should have a degree of everything if you're trying to be the absolute best that you can be in that particular modality. Just a matter of where you put your priorities.
Yeah. Yes. And I think that for a person to be healthy, you should try to have both. Whether the cardio is walking the dog, like I keep saying, or going out with your buddies, or going to the park with your wife, like just getting up and moving, you're winning. And then lifting is so important. Resistance training is like there's nothing that can keep you stronger, older than lifting weights when you're younger. And continuing to carry weight on your body in your hands, not on your belly, is how you win. Uh, Imagine you're 80 years old and you can't get up off the toilet. I mean, whose fault is that? You need to work on these things now while you can, so that those circumstances don't arise. So a full balance of everything is necessary. Being healthy, it's all about the goals. It's all about the goals.
Yes. Now, that example of being 80 and not being able to sit down under your own control is something that I actually work with a lot. So, a bunch of my clients that I have for personal training are in their 70s, and the number one thing that I work with them on is figuring out how to get them to do a deep squat. If you want to talk about the single most practical life movement, it's a squat. You are hitting so much of your practical needs. And I think with every single one of them, I've given them the example of when was the last time that you, under control, squatted down deep? And for some of them, that could be a good 30, 40 years if they can even remember the last time.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is when it comes to lifting and muscles, the old adage, if you don't use it, you lose it, rings true. And if you don't practice to be functional in those more extreme ranges of motion, then you won't be. And you can take a look at what happens and how people have those terrible falls where they break their hips or they're trying to go ahead and control. And you see that instead of actually squatting down low, they bring their seats higher. They go ahead and get a higher chair. They get a lift on top of their toilet so they don't have to sit down as far. And then they further lose those capabilities. There's absolutely nothing healthy about losing capability when you don't have to. And if you can go ahead and be strong and practical and simply be able to just sit down and come back up under your own power, you don't become limited in terms of where you can go. Because one of the saddest things that I see is that if I'm going to like a nursing home or something and I look around, one of the things that disheartens me the most is the four people that are sitting on their little chairs around a table. They're playing cards and everything. And they've been there for the last 3 hours because they could only get into those chairs because someone assisted them into them. And then they had to wait for someone to come around and be like, hey, I need help getting up. And then they get assistance come out of that chair. The difference of being able to just sit down and stand up on your own power, for some people, that's whether you have freedom or you don't.
And that's sad. You need to start now. And there's no way to get around it. I mean, your bones are going to become brittle if they don't have power. And it's just, you need to fuel it right. You need to move it. Get it moving.
Yep. So let's go ahead and take this goal and look at it in a few different ways. Let's take our 80-year-old that we're talking about who does not have the capability to sit down and stand up under their own power. Their training is going to be very simply just getting them to be able to do that on their own. starting from a high point, and they sit down a few inches and go ahead and come up from those few inches, and they do that repeatedly. And over time, you work with them just to keep lowering that and get them to be stronger. And then eventually, at some point, they realize they're walking around easier. They're not using the handrails as much. And they get to end up realizing I can just go and visit Bob over there, and I don't need someone to help me the whole way. I'm not leaning on a family member, a friend, or an aide to give me the balance. I'm actually functional on my own. That training is just as, if not more important, than someone who is an elite powerlifter who competes in the IPF and is fighting to be the number one deadlifter in the 76 kilo class. There's importance in both of them, but in totally different ways. Then we can take the goal of that powerlifter, and let's say they retire. They're not going to just stop. Their goal just shifts. And their goal becomes to be that person who's 80 years old in the home but has freedom. So they're going to keep on squatting from their competitive 20s, or competitive 30s, to then retired 40s, but then keep on going 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And that entire time, their goal is going to switch and shift and become something else, but always something. And if you can do that, it doesn't matter where you are in this graph. It doesn't matter whether you're prioritizing cardio, prioritizing resistance training, or having phases where you switch between. The point is you always have something. You always have a goal. And that goal will then be able to determine how your training looks at that point in time.
Yep. Yeah, and or maybe the goal doesn't stop. Maybe it doesn't change. We have people on the team. Alan Tissenbaum, world champion sprinter. He's over 60 years old. It's like it's incredible what you could do when you put in the time and effort and make it hard for yourself. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So we're gonna go more specific now. We've talked about the general goals and the general way to think about where you prioritize resistance training and where you prioritize cardio and how that looks for different categories. Well, let's break down a practical example. Here we have a very generic 4-day of the week workout split that you can do. It is structured to be very simple. You have your push day, your leg day, your pull day, and a conditioning day. It hits every part of your body. It has resistance training and it has cardio. It has it in enough frequency that you are going to be able to progress pretty significantly in all of them, but it has enough free time in it that you're not going to be forced to spend your Friday nights and your Saturday afternoons in the gym. You can structure it so you have your Fridays and Saturdays off if you wanted to, and it gives you that balance between life happiness and life improvement. So the simplest way to do it is to figure out where you are in this. Maybe you can only do 3 days, in which case maybe do an upper body day, a lower body day, and a conditioning day. Or maybe you just don't do the conditioning day. Or maybe you do 3 days where it's push, legs, pull, and you throw in a little bit of conditioning for 10 minutes at the end of each day. It all depends on what is feasible for you. But if you can find a strategy like this one where it's, all right, I do 5 exercises on day 1. I do 5 exercises on day 2, 5 exercises on day 3. I do those on Monday. I do that on then Wednesday, and then on Friday. And then Sunday morning, I like to go ahead and go out for a run. That's phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. It's simple, repeatable, and you can always then just be like, you know what? This particular exercise is a little boring. I'm just going to swap it out for something else. And it's easy to fill it in when it's just 5 exercises that you're examining every single time. It's all about being practical.
Right, and there's videos to show you exactly how to do everything. And we're posting those videos soon as well. We have other videos, but we already have one up, and it's showing the proper form for a bunch of push movements, and it's really good. And if you have any questions, you can always ask questions and let us know what you think for sure.
Yep, yep. And you can always look at it too in the way of frequency, intensity, duration, and crawl, walk, run. If your frequency is happy with 4 days, and let's say you're in a crawl stage, go ahead and start with this. And then just be like, all right, well, I'm in the crawl stage right now. I know I can do more, but just to get in the habit, we're going to go ahead and do all of this, but only to RPE 7. And you know what? I'm going to do that for 2 weeks. I'm going to get a feel for it. I'm going to get comfortable in the gym. I'm going to start seeing the same people over and over again. I'm going to get into a situation where I've accidentally become a gym person.
Yeah.
And then your habit is set. And then you can start ramping it up. Okay, I did my first few weeks, RP 7. Let's bring it up to RPE 8. Okay, I've done that for a few weeks now. I've gotten really used to the exercises. I've even gotten pretty good at some of them. Let's try to go to the next level. Let's go RPE 9. And then you start, as the RPE gets higher up, you start exposing your weaknesses in certain lifts. So let's just go ahead and say day 1, you are doing it and you've been doing it for the last 4 weeks. And you're like, all right, I'm going to try RPE 9 today. You do it and you start doing those push-ups and you realize that as you push really hard, instead of keeping your body even as you press, it becomes a situation where you press like this and you let your body drop. You just kind of fall into it in a weird way because you're trying to artificially give yourself more reps. Well, you know what? It's time to recognize, okay, I'm going for blind intensity right now. I'm trying to hit RPE 9, but I might not have the coordination to do that quite yet. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go RPE 8 and focus on the consistency of it. And I'm going to stay there for another couple of weeks. And you know what? Your lateral raises, that's a really simple exercise. All you're doing is going like this and staying steady. You could RPE 9 on that and still stay RPE 8 on the push-ups. That's okay. Because once you have the experience under your belt and you're making those decisions, guess what? You're not crawling anymore. At this stage, you're walking. You're walking and you are progressing. And you did that in some ways accidentally because you were focusing on the habit. You didn't even realize that you had progressed past crawl and gone into the next stage of walk. It's when you can accidentally get better without realizing it, and then later on look back and go, "Oh wow, I sucked back then. I sucked back then, but I got better, and I got better fast." That's a fantastic feeling to recognize that significant level of improvement.
And sometimes it's hard to know if you're doing the form right. I've caught myself doing things incorrectly, and I've definitely caught my battle buddies doing incorrect squats and deadlifts, things that they should not be lifting. They were trying to. And yeah, the form, it's just, you need to know the form in order to do these exercises. If you're doing, pretty much anything incorrectly, you can seriously hurt yourself. Seriously. So it's always take it easy in the beginning. Take it slow and understand where you're at. Generally, what we're looking for, a guy comes off the street. He's a veteran. He used to be fit, strong, got out of the military. Let's say he's been out for 6 years. He's got 2 kids, they're off, whatever, doing their thing now. And, he just lost his community and the boys that used to pick on him for not going to the gym, and for lifting too weak. And that's the fire that we're trying to ignite. But in order to do that, you need to do the right steps, right? You have to fuel yourself right, and you need to make sure that you understand what your goals are, and then you also have to go even further than that and understand the form. You need to keep yourself safe. The safety is paramount in everything, right? You got to keep yourself safe.
Yep. So I'm going to, on the safety aspect, teach you the simplest way to think about having your spine be in the correct position. If you want to control the top half of your spine and you want to keep a good position, chest up, shoulders down. This brings you into a good solid alignment for about here or so up. As far as going from here down, if you are trying to make sure you're locked in, don't go forward. What you want to do is just do a little back, a little hip pinch here. And I'm going to go like this to make sure you can see it. If you do this little movement right here, I've now locked in my spine here. You combine that with chest up, And now my spine is in a solid position. Let's say I want to do a row. I just take this spinal position and I just bend while maintaining that spine. And if you can do that in your safe position, you have now mitigated the risk for 80% of the movements that involve your spine. There are going to be exceptions to everything. And there are some exercises where you bend your spine on purpose. Simple example, crunch. An ab crunch. Guess what? Your spine is moving. So sometimes the correct answer to be safe is to move your spine. Sometimes the correct answer to be safe is you lock in that bottom part and you lock in that top part and you keep it like that the whole time. It all depends on the exercise and your knowledge of how to keep yourself stable and secure. This is the tip of the iceberg on this topic. The levels of breath control that can be involved, the different planes of movement, whether you are being symmetrical or asymmetrical, pushing, pulling, pressing, whatever. There are so many variables. But in general, if you're doing one of these standard conventional machines or lifts, you lock in your spine in that position, and most of the time you will be correct for doing so. Hmm, yep. Cool. All right. Conditioning aspect. Conditioning is something where if you do not have a sport specific reason to do a very particular method of conditioning, have fun. There is a reason why I have it written to be so vague there, where I say literally anything that gets you moving consistently as being the first part is really important because you want to be able to have fun and you want to be able to go back and you want to make sure that it's as easy to continue doing as possible because we're trying to set you up for success. I'm going to keep on saying that, so brace yourself for that because it's going to keep on coming as these sessions continue on. Make sure it's something you want to go back to and you don't feel it's a need. If you can take away the feeling of this is a have to do and you turn it to something that this is something that I do, that mental difference could potentially be all you need to make it something that is sustainably done forever. It's just got to be something you want to do.
Yeah, yeah. The first step is choosing to do something, to set a goal. You gotta understand where you want to go.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. So now we can get into some more specific questions upon these subjects because we've hit a really good broad overview of a lot of different aspects. But just as I said in the last slide, it's just the tip of the iceberg. And one of the things that is very frustrating is that the amount of information out there is overwhelming. And when you don't have the basis and experience to sift through what is actually worth learning and who is actually worth learning from, it can get really, really easy to get sucked into things that are meant to be more scary than true.
Yeah, yeah. That's true with a lot of things. The gym is way. Everyone thinks it's way more scary than it actually is. Everyone thinks everyone's in there judging people, and that's where people go to to release themselves, to break free from the monotony of every day and go lift weights and be happy and let those endorphins go and to be there with community. And community is one of the most important things that for longevity. Um, and yeah, I think our conversations here have just started. As you all obviously know, we've repeated it 50 times, but this is just the beginning, and we're going to continue to push this wellness. This isn't fitness. This is your whole being. We want you to be happy, healthy, and wealthy. We want you to know how to manage your money, manage your life, and manage your brain. Um,
Mm-hmm.
this is step one, so let's do it.
Yep. So what I'm going to say is it's balance. You know you have to do's, you know you have should do's. And if you can make some of those things want to's, that's going to be one of the most important things you can do in any of this. And as far as what to do, if in doubt, keep it simple. One of my biggest problems with personal training and the fitness industry is that so many people get caught up in tricking people into thinking they're doing more than they actually are, because they're having them do these extravagant circuits and movements that we're going to balance on one leg while you catch something in your one hand and then curl in this left hand and then try to kick out with your other leg while you're doing it all. And it's all designed to make it feel fancy, make you seem like you are actually accomplishing something more than more than you really are. In the end, I've been lifting a long time, and I've spent a lot of time learning from people who are way smarter than I am. And I've gone through the phases where I'm like, okay, listen, I'm going to have my perfect workout regimen where I have a 16-day workout split so I can hit everything the exact amount of times that I have to. And I need to make sure that I'm hitting this weird tiny muscle in my hip from this weird angle to make sure that I'm good for that particular movement, which will make me a better, stronger squatter. And in order to do that, and the depths I've gone to is insane. And what I've really found out is just keep it simple. It's so much more relaxing and easier and palatable to do. Just because I can go into really nitty gritty details about my own training, that doesn't mean it's actually beneficial. And when it comes to trying to figure out if you have a good personal trainer or someone's a good source of information, they should be able to break it down into something practical and easy to understand. If I start trying to spout out a bunch of nonsense with fancy words and you're like, that sounds smart, I guess I'll do it, it's not going to accomplish nearly as much as if I say, listen, we're trying to get you to be able to be 80 years old and have freedom of movement. And in order to do that, I want you to work on being comfortable in as many ranges of motion as possible with capability in those ranges of motion that are now possible. So I
Exactly.
want you to go ahead and try and squat deep. That way, at no point is that type of movement a surprise for you and you can do it comfortably. Oh my God, that makes sense.
As we say, keep it simple, stupid. It's not super complicated to be a well person, to be happy, healthy, and fit. It's not hard. It's just understanding the basics and then getting those in. And it shouldn't be a I have to do this. It should just be your lining. That's the basis of life, is to keep yourself going. So Alex, thank you so much for your presentation. This has
Of
been
course.
fantastic. Do you have any closing notes for the audience?
The only thing that is worth ending this, in my opinion, with is to make sure that you recognize that you're your own person. You are where you are, you know where you want to be, and you know where you were. Set yourself up for success by having realistic and honest expectations and knowledge of your state of being. You want to make sure that whatever you decide to do at the start is something that you can, without too much difficulty with, sustain for a while.
Yep.
You can always add more later on. But psychologically speaking, you will generally feel like you failed to at least some degree if you have to take away from that plan.
Yep.
So start off doing less than you think you should, less than you know you are capable of, and make it a habit, and then build it up from there after you've established what is truly feasible.
And try and eat something healthy after you lift. Thank you so much, Alex. That was awesome, dude. So, guys, next week we'll be back, same time, with the same stuff. Step 2 is next.
Mhm.
This is the very beginning. We're just telling you how it's going to go, and we're going to go from here. Thank you again, Alex. You want to shout out your
Sure.
socials and everything? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So my website is adaptablestrength.com. I have a bunch of different articles written on there, and they're, again, written with the approach of trying to be practical and easy to understand. I do have some more scientific overviews on there, but they're not as plentiful as just here is your practical approach to whatever the article topic is. And if you're curious to really get more in depth on like my opinions on how to find out if someone's worth learning from, There's an article on that, and it might be an interesting thing for you to peruse. Because one of the things that you should look at is if I'm actually worth learning from.
Yep.
I
Who
can
are
see
we?
all this stuff. Yeah, and I fully support you doing the research to find out if what I'm saying is actually good or not.
Agreed.
Make your own decisions.
Agreed.
Yep,
We're
we
not
got
giving
short.
medical advice. We're just giving you tips and tricks.
Yes.
Okay. We're
Yes.
leading you in the right direction. And May 15th, getting started with nutrition is next. Where you have sleep and recovery, part 3, May 22nd, and May 29th, part 4. Everything all together. All right, Alex, thank you so much for coming. And thank you, everyone, for watching. Until next week.
Yep. See you all later.